So, welcome to the Collective Unconscious Podcast. I'm Dr. Damien. This is Dr. Sheena. Today, we're going to talk about existentialism and maybe how it kind of relates to our work with clients. Sheena is somebody who works from this perspective. So, I do want to kind of ask her a couple questions about what it's like, and maybe we can have a little conversation about it.
Sounds good.
All right. So, first of all, what's that all about? What's existentialism? I mean, does all your clients do they say like, "Hey, I have an existentialist crisis," or how does it work?
Surprisingly, no one says that. And sometimes it even evades me, but it's hard for their issues not to be existential. And often we'll get to such existential crisis that it makes sense that they chose me as a therapist. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. They don't really come in asking for that.
So pretty much like all roads lead to kind of existential stuff, especially if it's someone like you as a therapist.
Yes. And if you think about it, how can something not be existential? Because existentialism is having you question your life, right? And where you're at. So if you're coming in with anxiety or depression, you're having suicidal thoughts, you're trying to process your identity, all of it has to do with existentialism.
So do you think like the common like contemporary person, do you think like these existential questions are different than maybe like generations before?
That's a really good question. I think now we have more. So we're allowed to open ourselves up to more existential concerns. That's not to say that people have not had these concerns, but also I would say with technology and the way our quality of life is, I think it's just something we question more now.
Mhm. Is this something to do with the idea that now we have like maybe 30 choices for toothpastes compared to back then?
I think so. And it's kind of surprising because if you think about like people from the 70s or even the 50s, they had to deal with wars.
Mhm.
So you would think that they would have more of these existential concerns, but it almost feels like we are the ones at least more vocal about it. It could just be that maybe they never felt comfortable talking about it.
You know, the thing I noticed with a lot of my clients is like they really question about like if they should be in this particular relationship or like what is it like to be in a relationship. And I just feel like they do that a lot more than they used to do that. There's a lot of like choice now. You could actually leave relationships and find hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world to kind of find another one. And all that choice makes people, I think, very it's I don't know what it feels like.
That's a good point. People had less choice before, so they also felt more stuck and maybe they accepted what they had. Whereas now we have more choice, which can be both good or bad.
I mean, if you think of like if you were from this small town and your father was a farmer and the person that's next to you is Debbie and she's gonna be a person you marry, you could always say like, man, I wish if I would have had a chance to go to the big city and be a dancer or something. But nowadays, like you kind of have that choice more often, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's more normalized. I also think if that is who you are, somehow you're going to do that.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And I do think, for instance, now there's far more choices for women, which is
Mhm.
just changing everything, right? Changing like the way we couple up, what we think of marriage, our family units, the family dynamic. Yeah, it's interesting. There's kind of a paradox with choice. Like you want choice, but too much of it is usually not good.
Yeah, I mean that's my probably critique of this like modern world that there's just way too many choices for many people, but that would be kind of discounting a lot of people's lives. But for quite a few people, there's like a lot of choices, and I feel like that's more anxiety producing than not having a lot of choices. But I've never really grew up in that world where like I don't know, you have a family business and you have the same people you went to high school with. I don't know what that's like.
I mean, that might be more comfortable too, like knowing what your life is going to be like. Because too much choice is that's going to create anxiety.
Yeah, I have some relatives who have like they had these like all their friends grew up together and they had this property they went to every summer and they're really tight knit and there's also a lot of judging. Like if this person's not quite like everybody else or this person picked this significant other. So I could see the benefits and the negatives of having kind of a tight knit kind of small group of people. And I don't know in terms of existentialism, do you think it's more or less like do you think about things like that?
Hmm. I mean, you saying that just brings up the identity issue somehow, and also comfort.
Mhm.
Because first of all, if you're born in a big family, most of the time they just kind of stick together. They're less likely to have friends outside of their siblings.
Mhm.
Um, but it is more judgy. And I feel like that's also possibly more cultural. So I'm not sure. Like, I wonder, philosophy is so based in, Western ideas and Europe. And there's certainly information around this when you go to Asia that I think is more deeply embedded with religion. But I do wonder if people across the world also think about these things.
I know, like when I think of like existentialism, I think of like Blade Runner or like you're in this like hotel room or this like single apartment in the middle of a big like Los Angeles or something. But I don't think of it much like in a small town. Like I feel like the issues are different. They're not like existential as much because all those questions are answered for you.
Mm, yeah, that makes me think of Rollo May talked about this stage of innocence when you're a baby, essentially, right? And like all of your decisions are made for you. And some people just never grow out of that because their decisions have been made for them. And I just think about how nice that would be on some level. A lot of us want that. There's this Seinfeld episode where I think someone George was dating wanted a mentor,
Mhm.
and then she had to like find a different mentor. And I remember thinking that's so strange, like trying to find like a guru essentially.
And I think Jerry said like I can tell you what to do in life if that's what you need, because that's how he understood a mentor. Like someone just tell you what to do. And I understand why he thinks that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of why most of us follow the blueprint of life, right? Like even you and I, we went to school for a very long time, and
Yeah.
there was comfort in that, and in kind of knowing that this is a long-term goal and I don't have to think about the things that maybe other people have to think about at my age if they didn't pursue the same thing.
Yep, definitely.
But you want some discomfort in life because that's usually a part of growth, right?
I mean, I think like most clients that come in, they come in because they experience some discomfort. And that's why that is such a great opportunity for them to grow. And if they never felt that discomfort, they probably wouldn't be coming to therapy.
Yeah. And that's kind of beautiful, right? Like something isn't sitting well with you no matter how hard you try. And it's almost like a pain, the way you'd go to a doctor and you're like, oh, there's a pain. I need to take care of this. But taking care of it involves you having to accept it and also change with it.
Yeah, that's true.
It's hard work. The other day I had a client, and she was going through something difficult, and I've seen her for so many years, and I just started crying because I got so upset for her. It's like, can she get a break?
Hmm.
That's There's moments, and I wonder if you have these moments too, where I'm just trying to make sense of the world because I don't understand why bad things happen or they continue to happen to people.
I think in our contemporary world, there are less answers to that question because maybe it's like less religious. There's less kind of authoritarian kind of means to tell you what's going on. So there's left with like a lot of like, what the hell is this? Like, is this God's plan? Is this randomness of the universe? Does this person have a psychology that kind of does the, like, if there's so much to not know about in this world, it's hard not to feel like completely confused.
Just even angry because it's such an unfair world. And I don't think anything makes sense. Like, even if you say, hey, we've decided to come here, you know,
Mhm.
it's like that doesn't completely make sense. Or, oh, it's karma. Oh, okay. That seems weird. You know, like all of these explanations don't cut it. Even if it somehow is the truth, it doesn't cut it. So it's like, how do you manage life knowing that it's unfair?
That feels very existential, right? Like there's no answer to that question, really. So you're kind of stuck with tolerating whatever that is.
Yeah. And I feel like so much of the time I can really get people through the time that they're having by letting them, just express their feelings or even just being positive. I think people don't understand that existential therapy is actually super positive. It doesn't sound that way. Um, but there's times for me even where I'm just like, I guess all I can do is be here.
Mm.
And that's something.
That's like the deep insight of existentialism is only thing you can do is like be there because all that other stuff, there's no answers to that make any sense or make you feel better, really.
I think most people who have crises or are drawn to this way of looking at life are people who are wanting answers. Like they're looking around like Siddhartha, right? And trying to say, like, what's going on? I don't get it. And you're right. The answer is there's no answer, and that you have to figure out your own way of being and what your purpose or meaning is in life.
I think that's the responsibility that you hear in like existentialism sometimes. It's kind of up to you to be responsible of like to make the meaning. And if you keep on looking to find someone like other people to tell you about it, like a guru or like a mentor, you're probably not going to find an answer that's going to be fulfilling.
But man, is that tempting.
It seems a lot easier. You just do that and then move on with your life.
I wonder if sometimes, I know, I like right now, even I'm going through this phase where I'm like, should I be finding some type of spiritual connection that aligns with me that I don't know exists yet and just devote myself to that?
That's a tough
Or,
question.
right? Or is it like, this is it and I just have to continue my own belief system of what is inside of me, right? Or what I think is moral.
That first question, that's like I don't even know what you can do with that. Like, what would you even do? You don't even know what it
I
is.
think
So,
I'd
like,
search the internet until I found something where I'm like, there it is, there's the cult.
so what you're talking about is external versus internal, right? Like, is it like out there? Should I look out there for it, or should I kind of look inside for it? And obviously, there's an answer.
Right. And I know it's inside, but I guess I wonder, is there a community out there that has the same beliefs that would make it just feel better, that sense of
Yeah.
belonging?
Well, I mean, I think that's like the fake duality of it. It's not either inside or outside. It's always like a combination. There's nothing just inside. It's still like you're still in relations to other people throughout your life. So, yeah, if your environment kind of reflects some of your insides, why wouldn't that feel great?
I love that you're saying that because there's so many like, you know, gurus, there's like Buddhism, all this stuff that says it's inside. And it's like, well, it must be nice to live in a sanctuary. But like, what about the rest of us, who are struggling from morning till night, who don't even get a good night's sleep or don't have enough money to take care of your kids? Like, those are real struggles. It doesn't matter how much at peace you are, you have to step up, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like these monks who go up to the mountains and like meditate for 30 years by themselves, and they come down the first time into a big city, and someone bumps them, and they get all pissed off
Is that
because
true?
because they learn how to be meditative around themselves, but like you really want to be in the real world. That's how you really want to interact. So
Yeah,
these are to be meditative in the real world is a whole different thing.
that's a really good point. It's interesting because we really try to adopt, mindfulness, meditation in our crazy worlds. And it's like, is it the way that we're living is wrong? And if that's true, then what does that mean? Because then we'd have to change everything.
Is the way we're living wrong? And how would you evaluate that?
Well, what I mean is like there is such a stark difference between living in the countryside or on top of a mountain versus being busy from the moment you wake up till the moment you're asleep. And it's a lot of sensory information. It's a lot of like chaos, that we go through in a day.
So you think it's affecting our mental health, basically?
100%.
I agree.
There's this whole kind of thought that's out there right now that says that how much can therapy really help you when you're actually responding in the correct way to the way the world is.
Mhm.
And I feel like there's truth to that. It's something I run across. And when people bring this up, there's only so much I can challenge that because there's truth. There's so much truth in that. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it depends on what you think the goal of therapy is. I mean, the goal to me of therapy is to understand a person and try to accept a person. So it really, to me, it doesn't really affect kind of how they're dealing with it. And if it is realistic or not realistic. I guess if you're a type of therapist that says, hey, this is not a realistic way you're dealing with this is a better way to deal with it, then I think there is some tension with that statement.
Totally. I really like I'm having an adverse reaction to the word realistic. I don't like that word. That's
Well,
such a
that's
word. And I get what you're saying. You're saying that is what's the wrong thing to view your patient as or your client.
right. That's the arrogance of a therapist who thinks that they know the best way to live or the right way to live or the real way to live. And they got to teach their client or talk their clients into living that way. That's a that that's a problem, I think. And that would have tension with that statement of like, yeah, what if people are dealing with it the way they're supposed to deal with it? Then what is your job?
I will say though, it is sometimes difficult when you have a client saying that, the world is horrible and they're struggling to be here, to be present, and you're sitting with it and you want to challenge it, but you also know that maybe there's not anything to challenge it with. And that the client wants something positive,
Mm.
I don't know if that's maybe resistance or I don't know what that is. That's definitely an art,
The client wants something positive.
but they have a negative point of view.
Mm.
Or I don't even know if it's negative. Like some of it is, of course, realistic.
Yeah, and you have that urge to like you want to like have them see it differently. Maybe.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's important to challenge people, that doesn't mean that I'm going to end up right in that situation, but
Right. So you got to give them another perspective, maybe, or like challenge them to be creative and like see another way of understanding something.
yeah. And, you even saying creativity, which I think is the way to get out of depression.
Mm.
How can we be creative in a world which takes away our soul, which makes us into robots?
Well, if you live in a world that takes away your soul and makes you a robot, you can't be creative unless robots are creative. Automatons that are walking around every day, like working all day. Do you think they have any creativity? I think it's like gone because of that.
I think that kills the soul. And I think you're so tired because what do most people do? Most people after work, they go home, they watch TV, eat, they're scrolling on their phones, they go to sleep.
Yep.
That's a sad life. And even those moments are just wonderful though. The moments that you get to yourself because you don't get them. There's a scarcity of it. So you have to have like, I think some energy to be creative.
Well, then I would think that like the busyness is actually the opposite of existentialism. If people were less busy, they'd have more existential thoughts about stuff. Like
Yeah.
staying busy actually keeps you from these existential questions. Maybe that's what some people want.
Oh, yes. And I think modes are really difficult to get out of.
Yeah.
Even I struggle with that. Like if I'm back to back to back and then I have time off, like I don't feel comfortable. Like
Yeah.
I want to be on top of stuff. And
Yeah.
it's also the opposite. Like when I'm struggling or when I'm depressed, I think I don't want to be busy and I'm like used to being like a sloth, and not that if you're not doing anything, that's what you are, but I'm just saying it's hard to transition, I think.
Definitely. Definitely. transitioning is something I find fascinating. I think it's kind of existential. And I feel like I always have had issues with transition time. I don't know why.
I can't remember the name of a psychologist, but this is all she talks about, and really focuses on it as a way to understand a person's anxiety, because we're constantly transitioning. Like, when I'm done here, I have to transition into doing something else. You transition in that moment in your car when you get out and you're going home. And I was just thinking about like vacation and why a lot of people have vacation depression.
Hmm. What
I
is that?
always try to tell people, like, take a couple of days if you can. Most people are going to take as much time as they want and like the next day go back to work.
Really? That's what most people do? That's
They're
craziness.
trying to squeeze life,
Oh, that'd be so tough for me. I have difficulty with that one.
Yeah. But I understand where they're coming from. I'm just saying, like, I think it's helpful to have at least a day, if not 2 days. Because just like when you get into vacation, it takes a day or two to be like, oh, wait, I'm free. I'm allowed to enjoy myself.
I mean, no, no, it's fascinating because I think like vacation's fascinating too because people usually have like a game plan or like a schedule. And like, I mean, the question that I always come down to is like, how do people really want free time in life?
I think this is a fantastic question. I think about this too, because we have been like drilled to be workers or for generations and generations. Like, what would we even do with that time?